The alternative Prime Minister, the leader of the Liberal Party, and our mate, none other than Peter Dutton. Please welcome. G'day, mate. How are you? Good to see you again. How are you? How you doing? Take a seat, take a seat. Take a seat, mate. Well, welcome back. We've done this before, and thank you very much for doing it again for us.
But welcome to our part of the world.
How good is it?
Great audience.
Yeah, well, you can tell the difference. That's the politician, right? But see the difference between the Queenslander and the wannabe Queenslander. I'm sweating. He's like, this is just the start of something. Don't worry about that.
See how the interview goes. I might be sweating by the end.
All right. We'll see what the questions are from good people. Today, interestingly and amazingly, 91% of people who were surveyed disagreed with what Lydia Thorpe did. You were in the room. What were you thinking at that particular moment when no one's cheering her on, no one's murmuring, no one's clapping, she's just making the spectacle of herself in front of the king?
Well, I couldn't see her from where I was sitting, so I hadn't seen before that she was standing with her back to the king as he spoke. So I think it was entirely predictable that if she was in the room and she was carrying on like that she was going to perform some stunt, which is exactly what she does. Now, the difficulty in talking about it is you're giving her the attention that she wants and she seeks and craves. But I think the government has real questions to answer because once she had made her statement, sort of performed the stunt, it was a very slow reaction for the escort out of the room. And I just think the government should have been better prepared for it. And they would have planned and they would have had discussions, but for whatever reason, they didn't jump in quickly enough.
What's your response to the AEMO stuff that came out of Senate estimates today, where government's made a decision? They say there was the fork in the road in 2022. There are hundreds of billions down the road. A lot of that is off budget, meaning we never actually see how big all of that is. Yet they themselves turn around and say, despite the main sales pitch, that at the end of this rainbow it's cheaper, it mightn't be.
Yeah. Well, I just think some of the emotion is now being replaced with the reality. And as you pull the sheet back on this, you're going to start to see a lot of anomalies. And Chris Bowen, I think, has been misleading the Australian people, along with Anthony Albanese, for years now. If you look at the offshore wind turbines, they've got a life of 19 years. So you have four life cycles compared to the nuclear reactor, which has got a life of between 60, 80 and probably extending out to a century. And none of that second, third, fourth life is taken into consideration in their program. So the whole thing is a hoax. And I think the penny has dropped for a lot of Australians. A lot of people have been well ahead of this debate, and the frustration is building in the community because when the Prime Minister promised on 97 occasions he'd reduce power bills by $275, for most people they've gone up by $1,000.
And amazingly, if your promise in going into 2013 was stop the boats, but 2 years in, they weren't stopping, people would be going nuts. I mean, this was a central...
The ABC would be outraged.
Wouldn't they just?
Wouldn't they?
Yeah. They may also actually be investigating what may or may not have happened inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office. Oh, no, that's right, only when it's Barnaby Joyce, but we get the idea, right? All right, let's get to some questions here, and then I'll pepper as we go along. We have Nicole, who's here. Nicole, Peter Dutton, what do you want to ask him?
Good evening, Mr Dutton.
Oh.
My question is, how is Lydia Thorpe allowed to continue as a senator when she stood before the King and clearly denounced her oath?
Well, she's given an oath to the Parliament and she needs to honour that oath. But the way our democracy works is if somebody is elected at an election in the Senate for 6 years, their term is for 6 years and it's then up to the Australian people to vote her out. She was obviously voted in as a Green and has departed. She's, even too radical for the Greens, which is quite a phenomenal statement. But I think it should be an alarm bell, particularly for a lot of younger Australians who are thinking the Greens are all about the environment, when in actual fact, the green facade on the shop front is nothing like what happens when you step into the store. It's just a radical, show, and there's, all sorts of crazy policies that they espouse, and she is a key proponent of that.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I'll get Jane up next, but before that, I want to explain part of how our pub test is going to work, right? We're a little way out from an election, so there's going to be questions about what will go here and how much will this cost and all the rest. But also, people want the opportunity to ask you questions to get better know the person. This, of course, will be the section that they will write about in The Guardian tomorrow. But still, let's find out from Jane. Jane, a question for Peter Dutton here tonight on Paul Murray Live.
Hi, Mr Dutton.
Hi, Jane.
Have you ever been given advice that has added to your successful career?
Have I ever been given advice? Yes, and for all the kids out there watching tonight, listen to your mother and father. They're very wise in the advice that they give to you. I think the most important thing that I learned, particularly from a young age, was just a work ethic, good manners and respect for people who are older than you. And I always believe if people work hard, they're polite, I think doors open and opportunities present. So I think that was probably early on at a very basic level. John Howard has been a mentor of mine for almost 25 years, and I catch up with him regularly and bounce ideas off him, and I had a great deal of respect for him when he was in the Parliament and the way that he's conducted himself since he's left. And there are other role models that I've had and other people whose views I really take to heart when they send me a text and say, well done, or why did you say that? So.
What about, inevitably as a politician, you'll always have somebody who'll say, mate, if you just do this, it'll all fall in together. Are there people who say tie, no tie, jacket, no jacket, change the colour of the glasses? How silly can some of the advice be?
Well, I remember one of my mates said to me, mate, you look so much better with longer hair. And I said, I said, look, baldness is not sort of a choice that I've made in life. And but and he was telling the truth, but just didn't accord with how I could, address it. But no, there's a bit of debate about that. But mate, I just don't have much interest in. I detest going clothes shopping, and normally Kirrily will bring something back, or the kids will buy a tyre, something like that, or I do one shop a year, and that's about it. So I don't take too much of that seriously. And but yes, they're all, all sorts of free advice. And generally, what happens is, particularly on an issue, and you'll get, a flurry of messages from mates, and some will be saying, go black, some will say go white, and in the end, you've got to make the call yourself.
Yeah, well, if it's from me, it's just bet on red. Just keep going, go, see what happens. Now, also, what I'm interested in is that you were very out early on the Job Summit when you went, no, I'm not turning up to that, right? We know where you were on The Voice. We know where we are when it comes to nuclear. And I've been somebody who, again, can get quite lost in the data and the reads and go, oh, what about here and there and this demographic? And, when you're trying to work out whether the country how much the country has changed forever versus how much it was just a choice they made one way or the other. Matt Canavan spoke to me once when I was extolling the virtues about, well, but what about this seat and what about that seat? And he says, well, mate, you either believe in something and you back it all the way, or you can stand for nothing trying to triangulate yourself. It's pretty obvious that, again, as you say, when people like John Howard are your mentor, that if you pick a North Star, you pick the North Star. How do you know the difference between conviction and pig-headedness sometimes, though, about, no, I've set the course and that's the way we're going to go?
Look, I think there's some natural instinct or ability that people have in, leadership positions, and I think part of it is, is part of the trade, and that you've learnt and you've seen the mistakes that have been made. I always say the good prime ministers, and I've worked closely with 4 of them, and I've watched the others on the other side, that there are issues that just get fired at you every day, and it's obviously a difficult job, but the good prime ministers, out of the 20 balls that they've got in the air, land 15 by lunchtime, and they sweat a few, and there's one by the end of the day that really is, a torture. The bad prime minister's got 40 balls in the air by Tuesday, and I think unless you've got the instinct and unless you have an understanding of, I think there's a moral compass in it as well. You know the difference between right and wrong, and if you get it wrong, then you need to fess up and be honest about that. And I think people accept that you're human and you make mistakes, but they also want to know that when you have conviction and when you state a position that you've made that decision and that statement for the right reasons and that you will argue on their behalf if they feel that you've made the right decision. And I think they take comfort from that.
So if the bad Prime Ministers have got 40 balls in the air, has Albo got an entire Rebel Sport franchise in the air right now? Like he's got cricket bats in the air, he's just got it all up there at the moment. Christian has got a question for you. G'day, mate. Thank you for asking.
Mr Dutton, thank you for your strength. How did the Voice referendum change political campaigning in Australia, and what did the coalition team learn from how No won?
Well, Christian, I think had the Voice been successful, we would have been in a hell of a mess as a country right now because the legislation would be before the Parliament. All of a sudden it would have dawned on the Prime Minister with the legal advice that, oh, actually this does have application to education policy. And we do need to check with the Voice on what's happening with this road infrastructure or this development or whatever it might be. And so the debate would have been, I think it would have given rise to a really angry reaction from the public, and rightly so, because people would have felt deceived. And to this day, the Prime Minister hasn't been honest with the Australian people about the Voice, about the true extent of its application. He's put money in the budget for the Makarrata Commission, but says to the Indigenous community behind closed doors, you know, it'll all be good. Makarrata Commission will be there after the election. And then when we get him into question time, he says, I've never heard of the Makarrata Commission. I don't know what you're talking about. So what has it taught us? I think it has taught us to listen to the silent majority and to understand what is in our country's best interest and recognise that even if people are urging you to sit on the sidelines and not take a position, that ultimately you are right and justified in taking a position that you think is in our country's best interest. When we took a position on the Voice, I forget the exact numbers now, but it was something like 60-40 in favour, and by the end of it, it was 60-40 against. And if you've got a coherent argument and you can communicate that, and you know, people were wavering in some parts of the country, and we were able to win them across with some of the arguments. And I think conviction is important, and I think that's what was demonstrated through the Voice debate.
Good on you, Christian. Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.